Been lucky she's been on twice.
All right. Hello and welcome. Thank you for logging on and attending this afternoon's program. My name is Matt Schumann. I am on the programming team here at Cary Library. Before we begin, please let me know if there are any technical issues that I can try to resolve. You can send those to me in the chat. Any questions that you have can be sent via the Q&A button. This program is made possible by the generous donors to the Cary Library Foundation. I'd like to now introduce Ashley Rooney, host of our gardening series this past spring and summer, bringing you a wide variety of gardening topics through the wisdom of local experts and Ashley herself. I should have said that Ashley is going to be continuing through the fall and winter.
That's all right.
Ashley is a prolific author and the past president of the Lexington Field and Garden Club. So now please welcome Ashley.
Thank you, Matt. Obviously, I've given us all a lot of laughter today. Once that fall is in, now that fall is in the air, and we begin to start thinking of winter coming, we can also plan for the spring. Linda Walsh is here to help us do some planning before we plant, which some of us plant and then they'll, oh, why didn't I figure this out beforehand? We rarely have a garden tour without including Linda Walsh's garden. It is a gorgeous garden. She's worked on her garden for 34 years. She will say it's trial and error, and you're going to see the pictures today and take a tour of it and learn from all of us. Okay, take it away, Linda.
Well, just plopping things down is okay. That's what the whole idea is. Trial and error. If it doesn't work one place, you try another. But I want to say right in the beginning, there's no right or wrong way to garden. There never has been. Whatever makes you happy is the perfect garden. I was introduced to the concept of this a long time ago. My grandmother remarried in her late 70s, after my grandfather died. And she married a lovely man who was an avid gardener. He'd go off in the morning, kiss her goodbye, go out to the yard, come in for lunch. It was just like he did this into his 90s. But when you looked at his garden, it wasn't a garden to me. It was like a cornfield. The plants were planted in rows, but he loved it. And for him, it was the perfect garden. But for the rest of us, it's unlikely that we could ever do all the things we want to do at once. And sometimes the problem is just you can't get your head around it. The house I had before this one, I had 3/4 of an acre, and I was so thrilled to have all this land. It was bare land. It was an older person, and everything had gone to nothing. And I was so thrilled to have all this land. And when I actually got there, I was paralyzed. It was too much. I didn't know where to start. It was so, a blank slate can be a blessing and a curse. So all of us have inherited vestiges of past gardeners, either previous occupants of the house or the landscaper that the developer hired, or even, as you said, I plopped this here, now what do I do with it? So blank slates could be a blessing or a curse. Sometimes it's good to work around these things. I want to introduce a concept that I picked up in my engineering career called fast, cheap, good, pick two. And this is something that's a major conversation among product developers and people who sell products, but it can be applied to so many other things, including our gardens. So if you think about it, you can have anything you want tomorrow if you're willing to pay through the nose. And you can have anything you want in a while if you don't spend as much and you buy littler plants. But you can always use these balances to decide what your priorities are. For me, when we moved into here, I had a better idea of what I wanted to do with the smaller space. This is only 1/3 of an acre, and the house had been rented before I bought it. And so the foundation plantings have really been let go. There were some inappropriate things. There were things that were wildly overgrown. So I decided to bite the bullet as soon as I got here, and I hired a guy with a backhoe, and he pulled them all out. But the things that I salvaged from this. You know, that it was not that it was bad material, it's that it was in a bad place. And I was able to salvage some really interesting things, including, can you see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Okay, can you see my cursor?
Yes.
Yep.
Good. This yew in the center of this picture was pruned into a 5-foot high bush. Yews are not bushes, yews are trees. Now for size comparison, this is my hemlock hedge, this is 15 or 16 feet tall, and this is this 2-story house behind me. So it was interesting to have, it was a funny experiment, but that was a foundation planting. Here's another view of it, and here it was very fortuitous because this house wasn't here when all this planting was done. It was a ranch house like mine, but this yew is now very conveniently hiding a bedroom window that would be staring down my garden all year long. So I'm happy to have that bush there. And there was a maple tree. This maple tree was about 7 feet tall, 2 feet from the house, and completely one-sided. But it looked like a nice tree. This is its terminal height. It's been about this size for at least 10 years. But I wired, this side was flat. And little by little, as it grew, I wired these branches and these branches together. And over the course of maybe 5 years, to the innocent passerby, it looks like a real tree. So this was a real find. I love this tree. It's perfect in my yard. I think it's bad feng shui, I've been told in the meantime, but I think it's great.
You moved it.
I moved it. That's what I'm saying. These things were foundation plantings. We dug them up. We moved them to different parts of the yard. And it was lovely material. It just was in the wrong place.
And you saved it.
I saved them. And they're lovely. Now, this is not my small tree, but in the vein of right plant, wrong place. This cherry tree, left to its own devices, will turn into this. Now, this one is mine, but it is a little over 10 feet from the house. And so I actually had read the book. It's still overhanging, as you can see, my yard, but these cherry trees, you often see them planted right here, and you let it go long enough and it turns into this. So you should have a general idea of how you want to use the space in your yard before you really start plopping things down. Or you can plop things down and then move them around when you decide. My priorities were pretty well founded because I worked a lot. So my priorities were formed when I worked, when I moved into this house, but they haven't changed very much. At the time, all I cared about were cut flowers. The only flowers that existed were the ones on my desk. So I was really interested in growing those fabulous peonies, poppies, bright colored irises, flowers, so I could have something on my desk when I worked. I was also interested in a 3-season bloom. I wanted to see the first flower at the end of March. I wanted to see the last flower in the middle of November. And so I really have tried to get that kind of thing going. And if you try hard enough, it can be done. I was interested in having a nice place to sit outside that was private, that we could have dinner. I wanted it to be attractive from the street. I wasn't interested in having a messy garden that if I was away 2 weeks on a business trip, I was imposing my messiness on all my neighbors. I wanted it to be pretty from the house. In our climate, you spend an awful lot of time in the house. And so I wanted that to really look nice too. And I do have a lot of houseplants. And so I wanted a vacation place for houseplants. So we started with the pond. We knew that we had to start with the pond and there was just no question about where the patio was going based on where the kitchen was and where the back door was. And in fact, we did move the back door too, but there were constraints such that the patio was going to be off the back door and the fish pond was going to be off the patio. So the fish pond went in first because we had to have open ground between the house and it to run conduit for electricity and stuff. And then we built the patio. So the patio is a tricky area to plant because this is my south side and the north side is where I'm standing. When I put the garden in, the house next door had, probably 10, 50 or 60 foot high oaks that were planted by squirrels 50 years ago.
Linda?
And
Excuse me, we're still seeing the cherry tree. Are you trying to show
are
us?
you? Okay, let me get rid of the cherry tree then. Let me see what I did. I think I brought up a new file. There it is. I brought up a new file without getting rid of old. Oh, and now I screwed it up because the shared window is closed, so I have to share it again.
Everybody hold on, she'll get there.
I'll be there, I'll be there.
Pictures.
This is where I was before, I think. I only see Ashley.
No. Not a beautiful garden.
Start Zoom. Okay, I'm going to have to start. I'm going to have to leave the meeting.
You should be able, if you just click share content or...
I've lost my Zoom screen. My Zoom screen is completely tied up in you. Ah, there it is. Okay. So. Not that. I'm sorry.
These things happen. We're all dealing with a new technology and it still has its problems.
There you go.
All right, I'm sorry. So there's the pond. Here's the patio. So the tricky part is this was dead shade because it was shaded by a bunch of oaks that no longer exist. Fortunately, I still have this magnolia. So I was never a shade gardener kind of person. I wanted the bright colors, the cut flowers, but I was sort of stuck with this shade, and over time I've gotten to really enjoy it. It's a whole different kind of gardening. Everything is very subtle, but I can see it. I'm actually by a window for the house. So when the very first bloodroots and epimediums come out, I can see them from the house. They're not far for me to go and visit. And it continues to be a shady garden based on what I've put around it, even though there's a very large house behind here. My magnolia, when it's in leaf, is also blocking the view from those windows in the big house from my patio as well. It's deciduous, but we really only spend time here in the summer. So when the sun is down here in the south, all the plants around me, behind me where I am here, are getting a lot of sun. And these are still getting no sun. This is an echinanthus, a dwarf echinanthus. But so from this side down, I still have to plant shade plants because they really don't even get any sun until much later in the year. This does well. I can plant, this is a begonia that actually comes in the house. This is a passion flower that comes in the house. But this is a, let me see if I can get to the next one.
There's a shade garden.
Yeah. So from this side here, that's getting an awful lot of sun and does all year long. So even though this is one consistent garden, I can have a couple consistent plants. I can put a peony over here, but I can't put one over here. I can put epimedium here and some here, but not much. I can put phlox here, but not here. I have just dug out some turtle head here, which didn't do well here. It burned out this time of year because it's getting straight sun, but I could put it over here. So it's a tricky space. And if you have a north-south space, you can, it's nice to have some continuity in the design and having some of the plants be consistent from one end to the other. And for me, that's primarily a stilbe and to some extent epimedium. The rubrum does tolerate a lot of sun. But this side is still a shade garden. So zipping back again, how clumsy. I like here to have some height without having bulk. Privacy often means evergreens, but evergreens have so much depth. I wanted privacy without claustrophobia. So I have some things that are sort of symbolic borders. This is funny. This is a clematis that has gone all the way to the top and died back and started all over again this week. But this is sort of a border marking this from the rest of the garden going out this way. This is a very tall plant that that comes into the summer. This here is also a plant that's in a high pot. So there is, in the beginning of the season, when everything is about the same height, even though there are different textures, I pull these things out because I can get a little bit more variation. And I can get at least the sense of privacy, even without going into a lot of evergreen. I have an evergreen here, that's a dwarf laurel, which will get bigger, that's pretty new, but I have some that are very old and they're no taller than I am. And this is the dwarf pine. So the shade garden now is kind of all gone by. But I do have some potted things that I put in here. These are Rex begonias that I take into the house. This is a camellia that'll go back into the house. These are cymbidiums. I have several cymbidiums that'll come back too. The caladium here I buy in the spring in pot just for this purpose, because what really is there is a gigantic bleeding heart that goes all yellow and gross this time of year. So I put these pots away in the spring for the sake of covering up empty spots. Here is this same dead shade garden a little earlier in the year, and you can see I have a few astilbes there. There are things that'll bloom in there, even in the dead shade. That's earlier in the year. But even this time of year, it's serene more than boring. There's a lot of texture changes. This is a dwarf goat spear that has a flower similar to an astilbe. These are the leaves of the very earliest plant. These are bloodroots. There's a little bit of Tricertus back there, some hosta, some pulmonaria, some pinella, a little bit of fern, some epimedium. This is a fringed bleeding heart and has been in flower since the beginning of April.
Yeah.
The ones that are in more sun have gotten all mangy. So this is the only one that hasn't been cut down. Let's see, there's some fern. This is maidenhair fern. But even the shade area can be kept interesting this time of year if you are choosing for foliage as well as for flowers. This, the only thing in flower here is this Gara, which is in a pot, is a potted thing I bought only this year. I'm putting a tall pot, and this phlox. Other than that, everything is foliage. This is another potted begonia. This is a potted begonia with some potted sweet potato vine. This is interesting. I love this time of year. Well, this was great for a long time. This is the Lictrum rochibrunianum, and I could see it out this window forever. It was so nice to see it. It doesn't block your view, but it's something to see. These will bloom pretty soon. This is a variety of Actea, and I have it under many of my windows for the same reason. It doesn't block your view, but at the time when that's the only thing blooming, you see a flower. Now these are the conditions. Yes?
Can you spell that? I'm getting some questions about some of these plants.
Which one?
The tall one you just talked about,
The Actea or Thalictrum?
the Lythrum.
Thalictrum.
Okay.
Rochabrunianum, Roch, probably Eabrunium.
Okay, that's close enough. And Dan asks about what is deciduous? I didn't hear that, so I don't know. D-I-S-I, D-I-U-S.
Say that again, please.
Dan asked, what is deciduous? D-I-S-I-D-I-U-S. It's a plant.
I misspoke then. I don't know what he's saying.
Okay.
If he described it, I could tell him.
Oh, wait a minute. It was the tree,
Oh, okay.
the maple, I think.
Echinanthus, the tree. This bush over here is an echinanthus, and I have some primrose and things underneath there. They get enough shade.
It's the tree
From that.
to the side. It's
This
okay.
picture or a different one?
Let's see. It's okay. You can pass. Different one. It was earlier. We got a lot of questions here. I'm going.
Okay. This? Magnolia?
Susan Cass says, I think he means deciduous.
Oh, the deciduous tree.
Leaves
This
fall off
big-
in the winter. That's what that means.
Yes.
Deciduous.
This deciduous tree here is a Magnolia stellata. It's a Leonard Messel. It's a pink star flower.
Okay. Good. Thank you. Okay, now. I'll say
These were foundation plantings as well. This is a laurel, and this is a Pyrrhus japonica. They were in the front and already too large. There's a laurel in the back too. I had a lot of good stuff out of what I was pulling out. I didn't chuck it, and it's been good to me. Any more?
one for the end of the program. Go ahead.
Okay, this is the same, more in my idea of trying to like emotionally cut it off. This is in the ground, but it is the same variety of clematis as this one here. This looks like it's sitting on the table. Actually, it's sitting on a support, and it's annuals sitting in this part of the garden because everything else has gone by. I get a lot of portable things that I can move around as dead spots occur. Okay, I'm making sure I don't I'm trying to get into another set of plants.
Is it in a different folder?
Let me see. I'm just trying to get back to my Zoom. There. Are you seeing my leave meeting or cancel? There. So this is another way I've gotten height in that last garden. This is a very tall pot. And then I get very tall Gara on top of it. But it's very ferny. When I had bigger plants against the house here, I had a lot of problems with mildew and rot.
Mm-hmm.
So this is just to, again, break up some of the everything being the same height without getting very dense.
And Gara is very nice because it blows in the wind.
Yes, and it's in bloom right now, to be sure, too. So this is a concrete pot I can't carry. My husband carts this out, and this is actually in a pot, which this plant I take in. I'll talk about that later. But this support is taller than I am.
Mm.
So then you go around the corner, and you hit a completely different kind of garden. This is only about 10 or 12 feet wide, and it's dead east and west, which means the sun has to get over this hedge, and then it gets, 5 photons, and then it's over the house. So again, not about shade gardening, I just had to bite the bullet, and this is entirely geraniums, hostas, ferns, hellebores. This gets 3 photons a day. There's just nothing going on there. On this other corner, though, is some more of this actea. The actea will take sun, but doesn't need it. It's one of the perfect plants. It's blooms at a great time. There is a variety of actea that blooms at the end of June as well. They're almost indistinguishable. They used to be Cimicifuga. They're both actea at this point, but they can bloom either at the end of June or the beginning of September. So this is kind of a second garden, and I block it off as a separate garden with this Harry Lauder's walking stick and with the path bending around. So I plant different things here. I have what is really one long, narrow garden, but I didn't want one long, narrow garden, both because I think it would be boring, and I have such different conditions. So where the garden we were in before has a north-south exposure I have to worry about, this has an east-west that makes it so dark all the time. The only reason the shadow is way down here is because I took the picture sometime after the sun had gone to the south. But this is a whole different garden, and not particularly interesting. I kind of brighten it up because there's not much going on. This is also a recent picture. This is, again, 2 very large bleeding hearts, one pink, one white, that go completely by, but are the big spots of color in that quiet little garden there. This is some turtle head that is in bloom now. That's a great thing. And here's another one of my pots of caladium that get moved around. And these are just annuals, but it's just a kind of a quiet, not very interesting part of my garden. You get around that, this is the shadow of the Harry Lauder's walking stick. And this is where I thought my whole garden would be, between the house and the trees behind the house when I moved in. And that was in part to, I sometimes really neglected my garden when I worked. I just didn't always have the time, and I didn't want it to look messy from the street, so I thought I'll hide it all behind the garden. So I had a border along here and a border along here and an actual lawn in between. And my plants on each side were so bent over looking for the sun that I just decided, why am I wasting all my light on the lawn? So I just made the garden be the whole thing and a path through it. This is again being blocked because this is a tricky garden too. Again, being blocked by the path going off and the U at the end. So this is my morning sun on this side, my afternoon sun on this side, which really behaves sometimes as 2 gardens. As you see, wow. It gets a half a day of sun, but it is different to get a half a day of morning sun than a half a day of afternoon sun. By the way, this is the June blooming actea. It's a little shorter and a little perkier. It doesn't bend over so much. But there are things that really can grow on one side or the other. I can't grow gentian over here. I can't grow much in the way of monkshood over here. I can, one variety of monkshood. I get better peonies with afternoon sun than with morning sun. I have things that burn out with afternoon sun that I can grow in afternoon sun that I can grow in morning sun. So when you have an east-west garden and you find something not flowering well or maybe getting burned out a bit, try moving it to the other side. I don't know how many have dead east-west gardens like this, but I have found this to be someplace that I can experiment with. And between the north-south garden, the east-west garden, and what's coming into my full sun garden, I can really find a place for almost everything. Now, this picture is being taken, this is the tree side of the east-west garden. So this is the one that gets afternoon sun. And this was taken yesterday. And it's showing many of my least favorite plants. This I like. This is an Actea that doesn't bloom because it doesn't get full days. It will bloom soon, but it's blooming later. But there's one back here, the ones that get afternoon sun are already blooming. So there's a difference too. You can extend your bloom by putting something that's tolerant of both morning and afternoon half-day sun on each side. But I'm not a real fan of phlox or perovskia or daylilies. But that's what I have, or Lobelia syphilitica. But if I were to take all these plants out that aren't my favorites, there wouldn't be much going on. So I started my garden by planting only my favorites, and I had the most fabulous first week of June you could ever imagine. I just wanted to take the week off of work and sit there on the grass and watch my flowers. But if you really want to have a garden that goes on and on, you get flexible. This is a vestige of I have also grow chicken wire for a living because I have a rabbit problem, as many of us do. So here you can see the path goes off to the left and it will bend around the property line here, but it also goes off to the right. So I like to have little surprises, and you can only see this from this part of the garden. You don't see it from farther down from what we've already seen. You don't see it from the street because these daylilies will hide it. You only see it there. And it's not in full flower, but there are a few flowers on it. It's much more vivid earlier in the year. But it's just another way of making this a different garden than the rest. And this is a witch hazel, and that marks the end of my half and half garden and starts my full sun garden. This is at the end of the house. So we go from there into a full sun garden. So I grow a whole different set of things. I try and milk my seasons. These are 3 varieties of lilac. This one and this one have clematis growing through it. This is tie-dye. There's one in here too that's a smaller flower. It's Lady Diana going through this. But I get an extended bloom by using these tall plants as supports for smaller plants. This got divided. There's probably a half a dozen more people in Lexington with this dark purple stokesia now. That got divided earlier in the year. But this is into a full sun garden. Be careful about what you put along here because things can really get into your can't shut these things up. Sorry. This is maybe she's doing better next. I have clematis growing up this side, and I have honeysuckle growing up this side. This is where the path ends. So it comes around here and doesn't go closer to the street because I really am not interested in engaging the street in my garden at this point. Here, I've gotten some more instant height out of a mandevilla that I take in. So that that was in flower very early in the year. This is a clematis that isn't very vigorous. It doesn't get watered enough. So the path goes through here and then comes through some rocks that are laid with Maz's reptens. So this is actually a path, but not as much of a path of this. This is about the only thing I couldn't hide. This is really on my property line, and there was a nice big tree here before that house was. So this, I can grow all the things I ever really wanted. But yet again, I'm still in the case of I have to mix in a lot of other stuff, or I'm looking at green the rest of the year. Both this and this are varieties of salvia that have been going on for a really long time. You can either deadhead them carefully to avoid, or you can shear them. And I've been deadheading carefully to make sure I don't cut off any buds that are already there, but I've also had time on my hands this year. But these are very long blooming plants, and they'll seed. So the other thing of deadheading, in addition to new bloom and not having the seed heads around visually, is that you'll get seedlings. They're easy to move, you can share, it's not a big deal. Then I go down into the part of the yard that I really expect to be seen from the street. So I have more persistent stuff. This is the arbor there. There's the lilacs, there's more lilacs on the other side here. And then it goes into a Sciadopodes, an umbrella pine. This is a smoke bush. It's kind of a border. I'm about to take this almost to the ground because I have suckers that are almost as tall as I am, so I can regenerate this. This I can just it'll keep going. But there's the path, and this is about as far as I really walk through. These things are more persistent. This is a spot where I always put a specimen plant so it can be seen from the street. Chances are specimen, like something unusual. Chances are something unusual is also something that's not 100% hardy. So I've had a little dwarf birch that lasted a few years. I had a really special viburnum, it lasted a few years. This is a dwarf peach. It does get little peaches that the squirrels are the only ones can eat. They're hard as a rock, but it is something interesting to see from the street. This is an Annabelle Hydrangea that just goes on forever. That's been in bloom since June. This is a dwarf laurel that is very, very large, but it's not quite as tall as I am and maybe 5 feet broad. What this helps too, and this is a dwarf weeping, I guess it's not a dwarf, it's a weeping spruce that 2 years ago the bunnies start to eat. This gets eaten 18 inches up.
Oh,
This used to flop down to I used to prune it along the lawn, but that was it. But the bunnies have gotten hard up enough in the winter that they're eating spruce.
oh.
But the other advantage to having all these persistent things, so it just doesn't go to the ground from the street and be playing dirt, it shades things. And over time, I've found that I can grow gentian in here, but only if it's to the east of something bigger. That's the gentian just here to the right of the spruce. If I put the gentian there, it burns out. So I have a few of them in there, but it can lend shade, but not all day long. Things can get enough sun to keep them going, but have the day a little shortened by this being west. So moving this way down to the street is west. So the shadows will get longer and shade things to the east. So this is evergreen, this is evergreen, this is deciduous, this is deciduous. This is a variegated Weigela, and then there's another lilac through which I grow more clematis. But I can grow pretty well all the flamboyant flowers in here. I have poppies, I have peonies, I have iris, I have, this little thing of reddish here is a hybrid lobelia between Syphilitica and cardinalis, so it's sort of a purple, not a bright red. I can grow, this is the garden I always wanted. Now this was, for the first 10 years I lived in this house, what I refer to as the weed trees planted by squirrels 50 years ago, between the property lines, as it is for many of the houses of this age. But given that my own south side was blocked by my neighbor to the south's trees, I had these all taken down and the roots pulled and put this in to get the sunny garden I always wanted, that I thought I was going to have in the east-west garden in the back. But there's very little I can't grow here. This is a rose bush. I love roses, but I don't grow them very much because it's a deep enough garden that it doesn't get good airflow farther back. So at one point, one of the iterations here, I did have a square rose garden up where the bougainvillea is, around up there that grew only roses that would have grown before 1815 in France. It was just, that was my thing right
You
then.
and Josephine.
Yes, it was anything Josephine could have grown. They're very fragrant, they're very lovely, they're one-shot wonders, and they mildew like crazy. Plus, it was kind of plopped in the middle of nowhere. You know, it was, I had the two borders along the trees in the back of the house and lawn, and then this rose garden. It was a poor design. It was plopping down. It was paying more attention to what I wanted to grow than the design. And I've moved things around long enough that I very seldom have to make those decisions anymore. I can grow what I want. It just has to be either on the north side or the south side or the east side or the west side, or the side where it gets full south sun. So here's another shot of the umbrella pine. I see these sold as 3 foot tall or smaller things that really look like bushes. This is another thing that you really have to be in it for the long haul. You have to put it someplace. You're going to want a 20-foot tree and just live with it until it gets there. There's the peach. And here's stuff that I have. I don't remember the name of it. I have one very late day lily. Here's some salvia. These are Japanese anemones poking their heads up there. Here's some gaura. There's actually a few flowers on a very small baby's breath down here too. And this is more to the other side, but there's stuff going on. These are sedum that are reblooming. This is a penstemon, more phlox, the Japanese anemone, the gaura. So there's stuff going on even this time of year. Then there's the street. So you look up that way and across that way.
And you've just been on a garden tour.
Yes. So I have, now tell me what I should be doing. I have to, Matt, how do I get to another file?
Is it in a different folder or?
It's a different folder, yes.
You might need to open those pictures in that folder and then start a new share from there.
Okay, I'll try that. So, do you see this? Do you see my yard or my patio?
We see your yard. I think you have to do the share button. You have to.
It says I am sharing.
Yeah,
so
but
I'll
you'll have
stop
to do
sharing.
Yep, and then do
and
a
I'll
new
start sharing again. Now, I did say one of my goals was to have pretty views from the house. So this could be prettier. There's a shovel and everything, but this is actually a bottle of fish food. But I do enjoy, even when I'm not in my garden, looking out of my windows. This is out one of the side windows, and here's yet more actea that will bloom and bounce around. This is out the window. I actually laid this out with a hose, laid out hose, and then jumped in the house and went back out again to lay out a line I liked that I thought would hide, that would actually terminate. I wanted a termination without terminating. So you can see that it goes off to the left to go down to the sunny garden and goes off to the right where the bougainvillea is. This is out of a bedroom window. This is out of another bedroom window. So I did
little garden portraits.
Yeah, I have the views I like from my house. So that was a goal. Now, you can also notice what I don't have. I don't have a place to grow vegetables, but I could. It would go up where the bougainvillea is. A children's play area, but I could. It would be behind the house where the east-west garden is until they were able to be not visible all the time. And then this garden that we're looking at now would be much narrower, and they would have the front yard merging into this. I don't have a compost pile. I could. It would be back in the corner behind the fish pond. I don't have a gas grill. It would probably be along the house, the window that we look at from the patio. A place for pets other than the fish. That would probably be the side of the yard on the, not the maple tree side of the driveway, but the other one. That's probably where I would put my dog fence. A garden shed could be put back here where this U is. Bird feeders. I've had bird feeders up and they were a lot of fun to watch, but unfortunately the birds would sit in the hemlocks waiting for their turn, and they brought woolly adelgid on their feet. So they were, I had to get rid of the bird feeders because I was getting a woolly adelgid problem and getting bare spots in my yard. So no bird feeders, but all that stuff, I could have it if I wanted. So I said I'd talk about too, somehow how you get some extended season out of things. So these clematis start early because I put them in the garage with black plastic over them so they don't get any light. I tried them in the basement and they wound up getting too much light, and they sprouted too soon and then shriveled off. So if you want to get them something started, a hardy plant, and I don't usually, these have been out for a while. I sometimes store them. The tall one I do store, I don't store with the support on it. These I actually do. But you can bring in probably other things too. Here's that little pot that has the begonia in it over the summer. But that's a way to...
You cut the clematis down?
Some yes, some no.
Okay.
I don't usually cut them down until I see new growth out of the bottom.
Oh, okay.
So I open them up and I look for new growth. And if I only see growth on the top, I let it go. I don't cut, if I don't see new growth, I don't take off the only stalks that are here. This one is quite vigorous. Some of these others are not.
Okay.
That was something also that lived in. Now, full disclosure, I have a greenhouse. It was the screen porch, the 50s screen porch on my house. So it shares a wall with the dining room and a wall with the garage. Then I have two walls of window and a roof of window. And that's, as you look out on my patio from the house, what's over to the right. So it doesn't have great sun. It faces the south side that's really kind of shadowed by the house, and east. But I can get a lot of good stuff out of there. So this was overwintered, and I do know people that have overwintered Mandevilla in the house. I would give it a try. I haven't because I don't have to.
I've done it in the basement, and it works.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, look at the caladium. That's beautiful.
So again, these are all hiding things that were gorgeous in the spring. This whole big patch was, as all the others, a big hunk of bleeding heart. But these are all things that have gone by. I buy these caladiums at Costco, and I put them in the first week of April, something like that, and I just sit them in the garage. And when it gets warm enough, I stick them outside. Oh, one thing I do have is a little place next to the greenhouse that I leave open so I can stack pots there. Some of my house plants that are vacationing go over there, but I have a place, just a little place, just probably 9 by 3 feet. That's really out of view of the rest of the garden that I hide pots.
You don't worry about keeping the caladium warm in April?
I leave them in the garage until it gets warmer. They live in the garage. They're fine. But they're indispensable. This would be so boring without them. Now, I also grow lilies in the garage because bunnies like them. And so I put them in pots and I put chicken wire around them, but I did not usually put the chicken wire around them until I put them into the yard. As I was gardening with my garage door open this season, the bunnies came in. They're very tame. They nap on my walk. I have to watch that I don't trip over them. But if there's, the lilies have worked out well as long as I chicken wire them now, in addition to putting in pots. I love lilies. I used to have 120 of them, and over one season, they ate 100 of them to the ground to the point where they didn't come back the next year. And the ones I do have in the ground, unless I chicken wire them, they grow up an inch, they get eaten down an inch. For some reason, these bunnies are genetically predisposed to eat lily. I also have other houseplants. As I said, this begonia comes out in the summer. It likes being out there. I like it being out there. And this gives me my instant height. This is another begonia that normally isn't in that pot. It's just in another pot, sitting in that pot, but it enjoys being outside. And I think it really helps the garden when it's a dead spot. This goes inside. This is in a concrete pot I can't carry, so Bob carts it back and forth for me. This thing has a hard time even at 50. This thing is probably 20 years old, and this is as big as it gets. It dies back, it grows out, it dies back, it grows out. But it's just part of the garden. I like it. And then I've bought annuals, and this is something very new. I don't normally buy annuals, but there are just now so many spots that have gone by. So I just have some of these columns I bought. I got some at some new ones at Hobby Lobby this year. I got those at Michael's some years ago. That's the little bright spot in my really dull garden behind my corner. This is just potato vine and begonias that I got at Home Depot. This is another pot of begonias, larger ones, but they stay. I've never been an annuals person. I always thought that if you're going to bother putting plants in, you ought to be getting them back next year. But these things have just been flowering since I bought them, probably the first week of June. So now I have some recommendations of.
We're going to watch our time, Linda.
Okay, recommendations for plants that are worth it. This variegated, this is Nora Lee variegation of, it's a phlox. It blooms a long time. It's gorgeous even without it. It's a bright spot in any garden. It actually seeds to this maroon back here. You can't propagate it, you gotta buy a new one. That's another thing that isn't my favorite plant, but it's a lot going on right now. I love this, and turtlehead is another thing that does very well both and needs shade. That's another shot of the front. We're done.
Okay. Oh, I have one question for you, but we are going to cover it in another program too. Let me get Susan's question. Let me see if I can get it. Do you do anything special to plants that you bring outdoors in the summer before you return them to the house in the fall? I'm worried about the possibility of bringing pests in the house.
No, not at all. I do the opposite. When I take them out, I have to very gently introduce them to more sun than they were getting, or they'll burn out.
You don't wash them with soapy water to get the bugs off?
No, don't get bugs.
Oh, okay. Susan, I get bugs, and I wash my plants with soapy water, including all the dirt, and then bring them in that way, and then watch them carefully to be sure there are no bugs still left on them, and usually it works.
I'll take that back. I do sometimes get aphids on my lime tree, and I will wash them off before I come in.
Yeah. I mean, you have some beautiful indoor plants there.
I have ones, I guess it's the variety. I have the begonias, I have cymbidiums, I have lime, I have brugmansia. I just don't have, and camellias. So I have unusual houseplants, indoor plants.
I mean, you have some tropicals there, and and the bougainvillea.
Yes, and the bougainvillea.
Yeah.
But I don't get bugs.
And you keep those all in your garage?
No. I keep them in my greenhouse.
Okay.
I keep the clematis in my garage, and I put the caladiums and the lilies in the garage until they're ready to come out.
When you say you put the caladiums, are you working with the bulbs at that point or the plants?
I put the bulbs in the dirt and put the pots of dirt with the bulbs in them in the garage
Amazing. I was
until they grow. So I'm looking at
Yeah,
bare dirt
I
for
have
months.
them on top of our furnace to be warm, and so forth. This has been great. It's wonderful to take a tour of your garden. And it's so lovely seeing it. I knew it from the springtime and then in the summer when we did the fish pond. But now to see it this season makes you think you can really do a fall garden tour to see a garden like that.
I don't know about that.
No?
I don't think so.
Too much work?
Well, not enough. I mean, I'm grasping at the last straws. It's not enough to take a trip. It's not enough to go through the garden. It's,
Not
nope.
enough. Yeah, I think most
It's
people
better
would agree
than
with you.
nothing, but better than nothing. You know, it's above cut, but it's not a garden tour worthy thing.
I remember when I was a young mother and Lexington Gardens was still here, and I would go visit it with the babies in January or February just to see the color and smell the green. And that's what your garden reminds me of, the color and to smell it all. It's so rich and lovely. We thank you, Linda. It was great. Next week we have, chicken farming and Lexington Farmers Market. And they promised me an Asian grocer and I hope farmer, so which should be very interesting. So I thank you all for being with us, and we thank Linda for sharing her garden and doing all the work that she did to present this.